Hi, this is Douglas Horn with Telos, and you're listening to Telos Live and watching. Today it's September 26th, 2018, and and I have two excellent guests with me today. I have Jesse Schulman of CalEOS and Ian Panchèvre of Amplified.Telos. And these are two of our excellent dev team leaders who are working on some really exciting things. Hey guys, how's it going?
Douglas, how are you?
So you guys both have really interesting backgrounds, and I think everyone wants to hear about it. So I'm going to ask each of you about your background. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the things that you're doing and working on about Telos. And we're going to try to keep this to 45 minutes because, nobody needs to listen to an hour of me talking. So, Ian, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. So as you mentioned, I am the founder of Amplified.Telos, and we're one of the dev teams and block production candidates that are supporting the Telos blockchain. My background, everybody kind of has this moment when they first take the red pill and go down the rabbit hole with blockchains. That happened for me in 2014, 2015. I was an undergraduate at Yale, and I was a political science major. I was in a class that was studying the intersection of technology and politics. And so I had to write a paper about an emerging technology that could have some sort of an effect on political processes. So my classmates wrote about the effects of social media and public opinion formation, or big data and electioneering. And I wanted to come up with something sort of original. So I was just deep into Google searches one night late in the library, and I stumbled across these Reddit forums where people were talking about using the blockchain, because at the time it was just the Bitcoin blockchain, to power a decentralized voting platform. And I thought it was a fantastic idea. I was like, wow, if we have a technology that allows us to disintermediate the administration of an election, allow people to cast private votes, but to be able to audit the results and make sure that every vote was counted fairly, and then, of course, enable digital voting as a result, that could really be transformative. So I wrote my paper on that, and coming out of that, I just knew that I wanted to study it further. So the following year, I wrote my thesis on Bitcoin. So I wrote 100 pages on the virtual politics of Bitcoin. I'm very proud to say it's the very first political history that kind of mapped just the political events that happened at that point in the currency. And kind of the big takeaway from there was that the political processes in Bitcoin are very real. Back in 2014, 2015, a lot of the Bitcoiners would argue that there were no politics in Bitcoin. And I argued that because they failed to recognize the political events in Bitcoin, there's a lot of people that are actually able to extract power in the network. And that eventually, next generation blockchains would have to think seriously about designing governance structure in the actual technology. So I wrote that. I went to go work for Intuit in Mountain View in Silicon Valley. And I was a product manager there. First day on the job, I'm asking my colleagues what our blockchain strategy is, and their answer was, "Don't worry about that. We are, not doing anything with Bitcoin." So I forgot about it for a while, and then I learned that later on there were some others at the company who were asking that same question: "What is our blockchain strategy?" And it turns out those were the executives. So I emailed my thesis out to a bunch of people. It got forwarded along to some of the people in the advanced technologies group. Within a few months, they had opened up a role for me. I joined as a product manager and started contributing to the company's blockchain R&D efforts. So I was the product manager who was helping Intuit come up with a blockchain strategy, and I worked in that role for about 2 years. I left in the spring, took some time this summer to kind of travel around, and then most recently now I started the MBA program at Stanford. So I'm an MBA 1 here at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. As far as how Amplified fits in, I've been very fortunate to be able to work with an incredible team of engineers, of designers, of business developers, and I've worked with them on a variety of entrepreneurial projects. So I've done an ed tech startup, I've done a mobile startup, and this has been my team, for years now. My team is based in Romania, the rest of the Amplified team. And they're just absolutely fantastic. And we've been spending the last few months kind of refocusing to take on a blockchain project. I've been a fan of EOS. I really believed in the technical vision of EOS, and then I was an EOS token holder through the mainnet launch, and I just saw the whole thing kind of fall apart into a total shitstorm. Watching the RAM prices really skyrocket. As someone who wanted to develop on EOS, that was really, really frustrating. So I remember actually in June, I was getting lunch with my wife. We were in Barcelona, and I told her, I was like, someone just needs to fork EOS and just start over. Like, we just need a hard reset on this whole thing. So when I read in a CoinDesk article that there were some EOS forks coming up, I got really excited. So I connected with you, Douglas, and I would say, early August was when we first decided to commit ourselves to Telos. And so for the last 6 weeks or so, we've been ramping up our contribution. But I really impressed with the community here. I'm really, really pleased with like the very cooperative and friendly culture that has emerged among all of us. So we're excited to be here, and we're really ready to rock and roll. So I could go on, but I figured that might be a good sign.
Thanks, Ian. I actually had a little mic problem.
No problem.
So you guys came in a little later than some, but you have absolutely hit the ground running. So to let everybody know some of the things that Amplified.Telos is doing, one, they're going to be able to look at really soon is this brand new, really new and improved block explorer and monitor that's really just puts the old one to shame, which is sad because people worked really hard on that in our office, but this is just very nice. It's what we needed to move up to, and I'm excited about it. It's going to have a full block explorer. It's going to it just looks great, and then that's going to be a way that we add voting and all kinds of features. So and your team completely took that on with a little help from
Sure.
some guys in my office. So that's exciting. And then the other thing that I want to talk about, that's as great as that is, it's a block explorer. People know what that is. So one thing I want to look at and talk about a little bit more tonight is the worker proposal system that your team took on and programmed. And all the developers are actually working very closely. So it's very hard to say that anyone totally did any one thing in a vacuum, because we're working as a team. But you guys really took the lead on that, and you're doing an amazing job. I love the fact that we're going to have a working worker proposal submission system from day one. I know there's questions about whether that's the right way to go or not on EOS, but I am a huge supporter of that. I've been involved in other communities that have had this, and like Dash and Pivx and other places where in those only masternode owners can vote, but there's still a lot to learn about that, and we've built a system now that you guys are physically building and is working and is super cool, where anyone can propose, anyone can vote. We have some good protections in. We've been able to learn some really good things from the existing systems, and I would be surprised if there weren't at least a few people in the EOS world who weren't a little bit jealous about what we're going to burst out of the gate with, and maybe consider it might be a good approach. So
over.
Yeah. So who knows? Anyone can. So you guys are doing a great job on that. I want to bring in Jesse Schulman of CalEOS, and hey Jesse, how's it going?
Good, Douglas.
So Jesse, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll talk a bit about what you're working on, and then we can kind of talk, and then we can each talk about we can all talk together about each of these really big pieces of the pie that are getting hammered out.
Sure, sounds good. And yeah, thanks for having me on here. Excited to be here. So my story is I've been doing technology professionally for about 10 years. I started off, I'm like totally self-taught. I started off in a data center, learning stuff, working a graveyard shift, configuring servers, doing whatever customers asked us to. We were big on
man, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, and it was interesting getting the customers. We kind of had the cheapest Linux servers if you Googled it, so we would get the people that didn't know what they were doing because they went for the cheapest deal, and so you get to learn a lot hands-on right out the gate. And then left there and went over to what turned out to be an amazing adventure, a SaaS company that I rode for about 6 years, and started off in operations, kind of with the growth that we went through, was forced to automate everything that we could because you just couldn't hire enough people to do the work. And so got into development just out of necessity, learned how to write shell scripts and then build more complex automation, and left there after a couple of years, kind of moved into product development and just writing code, but never lost the passion for the infrastructure stuff. So, and being in that company, I mean, I have to admit it, you know, I think it was 2015, you know, one of the guys I worked closely with, he was big on Bitcoin, and it was $25-50, and he was getting it. And I'm like, he was buying it, I wasn't getting it, but I started to pay attention. And then, so, you know, then Ethereum came out, and I remember when it first came out, and I thought, oh, is this what, you know, I thought about it, but I missed that boat. And so kind of somewhere around 2017, I finally put my money in, and I found one as an investor who's technically adept. You follow your money and you pay close attention to the technology when you have the potential to understand it. So I started paying closer attention, learning about the technology, the coins I was investing in. I never was a big fan of the proof of work concept, just because all the electricity and the stories you read about, you know, and then understanding the technology and you know, solving this complex math algorithm with, you know, but is it really serving the purpose of anything other than just solving the math equation? It just seemed kind of foolish. So I started.
We could have a whole argument about that, because as much as I love DPoS, I am not willing to sign on to poo-poo proof of work. But
okay. Well, I just never, from the technology perspective, I could, you know, wrap my mind around it. But
it's a totally different use case. But yeah. I think a lot of people see it the same.
Yeah, and so I started thinking, you know, hey, I'm learning these technologies because I put my money in them. Why not try? And so obviously Ethereum was the place to go, and it was like, you know, I'll tinker with building the dApp, you know. So I started playing with it and quickly realized as gas prices aren't going to cut it. You know, my dApp model, you know, nobody's going to want to pay a transaction fee for every time they interact with the contract. And so then I found EOS, and was kind of, I found a couple of the ones that are transactionless, but really, you know, EOS was the one that I, you know, locked in on. So early this year, you know, kind of started working with Don, who's my kind of co-founder here at CalEOS, and we, you know, started playing with some dApp ideas. Then the RAM price, you know, the network launched, RAM prices skyrocketed. Our idea got real expensive. I started paying attention to like the airdrop model and how expensive that got with RAM. But by the time it was all kind of matured, a couple months after launch, I realized we were running our own nodes and, you know, to develop on, and had a really good understanding of the software from that perspective. And then when I heard about Telos, it was pretty much a no-brainer. I said, these guys are doing things differently. You know, after observing some of the bumps in the road with the launch of EOS and post-launch, you know, it was a pretty easy decision to come join Telos. We had 100% confidence that we could run the nodes because we'd been doing it since, you know, Dawn 3 or earlier. And you know,
well,
so
you're doing
that's
it.
how we got here.
You're in that. You're on. Jesse is working with our network group, and with a few other like real superstars on there, and you know, and you're definitely one of them. You have really strong ideas. You know exactly what you're doing. You really give great advice, and you're part of that group that you know, is really collaborative. Like both the development groups and the network groups are very super competent and very collaborative, and everybody works together great. That's one of the things I'm really happy to be associated with Telos.
Yeah, and so the couple of things I'm got here to talk about is one is like the tip 3 that we'll get to, which was something I proposed shortly after I kind of joined the Telos launch group, which is to kind of help with the air grab RAM situation there. And then the other thing that I did recently was the EOS Mechanics Group, which is kind of a chain agnostic independent group. Started with some of the guys from the EOS mainnet, but really the goal is to learn about how well we can get the EOSIO software to perform. And they've done a lot of really cool stuff. They have a benchmarking contract and stuff. So that's just interesting stuff from somebody who's kind of ran infrastructure and then kind of gotten to know this EOSIO software, kind of merging the two and figuring out what's the best way to configure and run this stuff. What's the best hardware and all that. So
yeah, and that's actually a really great Telegram channel. Give the handle out or post it here. I go there and read everything so that I can sound smart about the mechanics and all the other channels. That's my source. I like to read that and then just parrot whatever you guys say and sound like a genius.
There's definitely some really smart guys in there. So
yeah,
I've learned a whole lot myself there.
Yeah. So let's talk let me give a little bit of an overview. So thanks for that. And let's give a little bit of an overview of this of your tip 3, which was very early in the system, and you told me about it. And I thought that's a great suggestion. Why don't you write that up? We had just started the whole Telos improvement proposal idea and system, and it was a great one. And what it was around was the idea that how are we going to find a way to make it cheaper for people to do airdrops, right? And we were going, and you were just, it was actually, I think it was one of those convergent development evolution situations where right about the same time as you had mentioned that, then the sort of the poor man contract and that had come out on EOS. But the idea is very similar, which is instead of everybody who's going to do an airdrop allocating system resources to create basically their own snapshot, right? Which is a poor use of system resources and prohibitively expensive on the people who actually do it. Why doesn't the system just create a series of snapshots, right? Like a Genesis snapshot, for example, and then maybe every couple months it will come out with another one, and that'll as the current snapshot that will last for a certain amount of time, so people have time to claim and everything, and then sort of those sort of sunset on a rolling basis. So there's always like one or two most recent ones. There's the current most recent one that we would encourage people to deploy their air grab on if they don't want to use to use the Genesis one, which we're going to go asterisk by that. I want to talk about that in a second. But and then there's like maybe one back so that anyone who's still in the process of deploying a few weeks or months later, that doesn't disappear for them. I think it's a great way to approach it. I think it's so much better to have that under broad system resources, and I think that's one of those things that either the Telos Foundation or the working proposal system should provide the RAM to do. And probably it's just a lot easier to have that a service of the Telos Foundation. So I think it's a great one. We haven't had a chance to vote on it yet, but in the meantime, some really good things, some really good developments happened both around the tip 5 token contract and then some feedback we got from people about the idea of what a Genesis snapshot would look like on Telos if we didn't want it to just be almost shot for shot remake of the EOS one. So and that brought about another tip which doesn't have a number yet, but we can kind of talk about all that in tandem.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so it's pretty much a summary of the tip 3. That the goal is that as a developer trying to think about what to build when the RAM problem happened on the mainnet, I thought to myself, well, if I'm not going to pay for 160,000 accounts worth of rows in my balance ledger, if you will, for the RAM for them, then maybe they can request the row but then I realized it's going to start off empty, and what's that user experience when you go spend your RAM to claim, but then it's empty. And I thought to myself, can I find the Genesis balances from the contract? Is that on chain? And I kind of poked around and asked, some people on Telegram, is this even possible? And the consensus was no, but the fact is no. So I thought to myself, and that's where this came from. I thought, well, somebody just needs to deploy a contract, because contracts can read the tables of other contracts. All tables are public. And so if somebody had a contract somewhere that had that Genesis balances, then when somebody came and said, hey, I want to pay for the RAM to claim your, Jesse token, I could go ahead and actually give them, 1-to-1 or 5-to-1 ratio of Jesse tokens to what they had, whether it's in the Genesis or, like you said, Douglas, in the last month, maybe we've had a newer one, so we can keep those up to date, and you can grab based on, the most recent snapshot. So that's really what tip 3 is about. I proposed it. Like you said, we haven't voted on it. There's probably decisions around timing and things like that to be made. But I put it out there. I also put on our GitHub the snapshot contract, as well as I kind of modified the EOSIO token contract so that it could talk to that and a kind of proof of concept that I can go to the token contract and claim, and it will go read from the snapshot contract, come back in one transaction. I've paid for the RAM and I have tokens in there. And the DApp developer paid for almost nothing except, maybe deploying the contract. So that's really the value prop there is, the DApp developer can still give you what was in a snapshot, but not pay for all of it. It's like
yeah. Right. And at the same time, we don't have to have, like for any period of time, a bunch of different developers having to use up RAM for essentially the exact same thing on the network, right? So exactly. I think it's a really good proposal. I'm almost positive it will be accepted. I don't know why it wouldn't be. I think it's a little bit of a victim of its own success, and also just the reason it hasn't been voted on is probably because we're just, everybody's like nose to grindstone about the stuff that we absolutely has to happen before the launch. And so this is not a must-have before the launch. So it'll probably happen, soon after or during that period of activation, when we could take a breather and stuff. But I'm sure it'll happen. And actually, it benefited a little bit by not going immediately because there's been a couple of developments, right? And the main one I think is the tip 5 token standard that Craig Brascom at GoodBlock put together, and which is basically a way to have what started out as a way to have an Ethereum ERC20 style token that has more of that input and output and those methods than the EOSIO token did. It's much better for developers. Actually, recently, EOSIO token also adopted a couple of the things that Craig had put into the tip 5. And of course, all these things are just things that happen in parallel because smart people are thinking about the same things at the same time. I don't think anybody's copying anybody. It's just like, hey, we got a lot of smart people going, hey, how do we make these things free? How do we save system resources? How do we make these tokens better for people who are used to, what the interface is for an Ethereum token? So all these things are kind of happening, a lot of smart people working in the same place. But this tip 5 is great because it has like allocations and allotments. And together with your idea in the tip 3, I think this makes it very easy to have something that's essentially like an airdrop at the cost of an air grab, let's say.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, since tip 5 came a little after tip 3, as soon as I read through what Craig had drafted.
It came two after.
2 after. Yeah. And I saw it. I said, Craig, hey, in my tip, it's really focused on the snapshot. I gave an implementation of the token contract and how it could consume the snapshot for doing a claimable is kind of what I was calling it. But it's, I've talked with Craig and it makes the most sense to just have the tip 5 include an option to grab against a known snapshot. So yeah, it's like you said, the natural evolution of a lot of people really thinking deep on everything in the community and coming to the right conclusion in the end, a lot of times in parallel on their own. But then it's real affirming when, I thought about doing this and then look, there's Poor Man Token doing the same kind of thing. Craig's coming to the same, yeah, we'll all get there to the right result at the end of the road. So
the natural solutions are very, like their main way to getting there. You may be looking at it from a little bit different, but the natural solution of what you're going to land on there's a very logical approach to doing it, and so everyone's kind of taking that with a slightly different implementation. So yeah, no, I think it's great. And then let me talk about the other part of that, right, which is this new Telos improvement proposal to use what's called a Telos original snapshot, which it doesn't have a name yet. It's going to go in GitHub. It doesn't have a number yet. It's going to go in GitHub probably right after this. But I've been talking about this on Telegram with people for a while, and so I wanted to capture it so we could actually talk about it today and also start voting on it. The idea is so the genesis of this idea is this. People would come in and say, why are you guys using the old snapshot? It's so old. And we're like, well, it was really new still when we started, and time has passed. But also there's the idea, there's some very real reasons we have to use that. One is that if we don't, then the cap doesn't really mean anything, which means we don't get to fix the tokenomics the way we would like to. Also, we do generally believe that if you're going to reward someone, the best people to reward are, one way of thinking is you really should reward the people who backed it earliest and helped make it become a reality. Of course, actually, we all know that that Block One was very clear that they didn't actually ever need their raise in order to make this work. It's more about a VC fund, but regardless, we wanted to support that. We also, other reasons are we wanted to make sure that there was enough, that we were certain that they were going to be able to have have exchanges have a snapshot at the time, a common snapshot. And the only one we were certain everyone was going to be able to have was that original, or was the Genesis snapshot. And so that gives us a better chance to get everybody whose tokens were locked up on exchanges at the snapshot time to get theirs. So for a lot of reasons we had to do it, but people were disappointed about that. And I just said, look, anything we do unfair to somebody, and this has all these other reasons, it lets us go and easily make sure we get the right keys, rekey people. We can do, there's a lot of advantages to using the EOS snapshot. And somebody said, you know what, here's the problem with that. Here's what that doesn't include is this idea that every new project wants to be able to reward their early adopters, right? That's an incentive to become an early adopter. That's, the people who come in early, they, in all the other crypto projects, they've been able to benefit by helping to build the system and make it legitimate and give it first users and everything. So why should Telos be the only one who doesn't get to do that, right? Because what would happen is if we just used a slightly different version of the EOS snapshot, where we had fixed a few people's keys and done a few other and added, and blocked in some tokens for people, but not distributed them like for the community rewards people, right? Then it's just propagating this old snapshot, and it doesn't let anyone become a new first user for Telos. All we have are these leftover EOS users, which some of them may want to, but some of them never want to Telos at all. Like, people have been pretty clear. I think a lot of those people who've been clear will change their mind when they know more about Telos. But I can't assume that everyone will. Some people just don't like it and they won't use it. So why would we include them on a snapshot? At the same time, why wouldn't we include all the people who were part of the community rewards pool program, where people go out and tweet and make videos and tell the world about Telos and help spread the word and help, a lot of those people are going out and trying to reach people in different communities and say, hey, change your keys. We have this way. So people are doing a lot of good work for us. We're giving them a free account and free Telos, but that wouldn't be captured on that. Why would we want to leave those people out? Why would we want to leave out people who are eager to get onto the Telos system and buy, on exchanges as soon as they can within the first few weeks. And, why would we necessarily want to include people whose only interaction with it is to sell their tokens as quickly as possible, which always happens in these airdrop scenarios. So as a response to this very real user suggestion, we went, wow, I didn't think about that. And so I started talking on Telegram and channels about an idea of an original snapshot instead of a genesis. And we're going to launch, and the main plan now, we have to fully finalize this, but I believe the plan of how we're going to launch the network is we will launch. The 15% thing doesn't really apply to Telos, actually, because 15% activation voting is all about the fact that EOS, block one sold a bunch of EOS, but never really, but was arm's length at launching the network. And so because they were always going to be arm's length, they wanted to make sure that there was some kind of activation that would make sure that of all the many versions of the network that emerged, only the most accepted one would actually become, get to bear the EOS name. Well, it didn't shake out like that, which is fine and good, but there's really no reason at all to do 15% voting for activation on Telos. It turned out there wasn't even a reason to do it on EOS. So there's absolutely no reason to do it on Telos. Meanwhile, we have dApps and exchanges that are waiting for us to activate. So, and that we're kind of letting down if we wait too long. So what we're probably going to do is we'll launch at a point that's probably like 1 million blocks. We will activate short of any problems. And then what I'm proposing in this tip is that at 6 million blocks or 5 million blocks past activation, which is 29 days, on the 6 millionth block, we will take a snapshot of everyone who has opted in and what their balances are. So anyone who wants to be on that snapshot, that's the one that if you opt in or create one of the free accounts that we're creating for people and get on the system and buy a bunch of tokens for your account, you would get to participate in that snapshot. If you have sold all of them, then you participate by not being on the snapshot. And if you if you haven't opted in, we want to give people enough time to opt in. But perhaps if you haven't opted in, your address wouldn't be included on that snapshot of early adopters, and that would let us have an original snapshot, which we would encourage all the first round of airdrops and dApps and things like that to we and that would always be on there under your tip 3, and then we would also take your idea of continuing and doing a rolling snapshot. So I think Jesse, those things work really well together. But this is kind of the debut of that idea of not doing a snapshot at block, at the first block or the 0 block, but instead at like 6 million, which would be roughly 1 month after activation, and let some people get onto the system. And we've had a really good response from this on Telegram, but we're trying to get it out into the wider community so more people can say, yeah, we like that idea, or what are you guys thinking, or whatever their response is, because ultimately it's the community who's going to decide. But we feel this is more inclusive. So anyway, that's that plan.
Yeah, I like it. They definitely both feel complementary proposals. So I think it would make sense to think of the two holistically. But I mean, independently, I'm supportive of either of them. I think the broader conversation we can have though is what is sort of like the optimal token structure going in, because obviously the token structure is really critical to the overall health of the network. Yeah, I think in general, there's an ethos within the Telos community to try to have things a bit more egalitarian. When you look at sort of like the Gini coefficients of these various chains, it's just really absurd how the crypto rich pretty much control the entire network, right? And then everyone else is fighting for like a few percentage points.
Yeah.
That problem is like especially outrageous when it comes to EOS. And so in the case of Telos,
it's actually worse. If you look at that chart, it's actually worse on Bitcoin and Ethereum than it is. You know, give EOS their due. It's not as egregious on those as it is on EOS and Ethereum, to be honest.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, you know, if we were to say compare the inequality on these networks to like the inequality in various countries, like they would be like the most unequal countries in the world, right?
Like they would be like the United States or something.
Not even.
I'm kidding.
I don't think a country exists that is that unequal, right? So I think for me, you know, we have to ask ourselves, what are the objectives of the token design? And I think there's sort of two elements that really kind of come into play. The first is, you know, we want the tokens to be distributed to the right stakeholders, so that we can grow the early community, right? If we have an economy that's relatively egalitarian, then it'll be easier to sort of attract new talent because they won't feel like they're at a disadvantage within the network. And similarly, sort of the democratic components of on-chain governance, you know, specifically in regards to DPoS, I think will be healthier when we have a more spread out base of token holders. So that's kind of like one interest. And the second is, you know, how do we sort of like structure the token economy in a way that sufficiently compensates contributors both for their early efforts and moving forward. And those two can be at odds with each other, but I think there's a good balance there. And to me, you know, the proposals we've discussed thus far are very much, you know, in line with either of those objectives.
Yeah, that's the goal, right? I mean, I know people are concerned about to contributors, but if you really look at it, you know, with the help of the community and their feedback, we really quickly got off very wrong-headed approach that I wrote, right? That was all my fault. But to our credit as a group, we said, no, this is you know, this is not the right way to do it. Having this 1 million to 6 different entities. Let's just take that 6 million, split it up based on work by anyone who wants to come in. And as a result, I think that's why we have over 100, you know, real contributors right now, as opposed to like 6 teams of 3 or 4 people, right? So much better. The community has spoken. And so this is also something that grew out of the community speaking, and I think it was a great idea. So I'm excited, and I'm glad you like it. I mean, I think solving, like, not reproducing the legacy code of the economic system going into this is a big plus for Telos, and it's something that going forward that crypto really needs. And if you like, you know, people who are looking that, it's great to solve that for the future, but let's also try to solve some of this distribution challenge in the present as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. Since we're on the topic of the tokens, can I throw out an idea for you guys?
Go. Let's shake it up, man.
So I haven't written this up into a formal tip, but I will do that. I've started it, but it hasn't been published yet. So also in the spirit of, you know, how can we sort of attract new people to this community? How can we get, you know, a distribution of tokens that seems fair? I'd like to propose having a sort of a lottery, or maybe lottery isn't the right term because lotteries imply that people pay into it. Maybe a giveaway would be more appropriate. But the basic idea is that yeah, so the basic idea is you'd have like a jackpot of tokens, right? And so in the proposal that I'm working on, like, let's just say we had 10 million tokens, but that number is something we can obviously adjust up or down as necessary. Yeah. But we just create this tokens, you know, in the Genesis block that goes into specific contract. And then we basically build, and this could be a worker proposal that, you know, anybody could do, but somebody in the community steps up and builds a web application that is going to interact with this contract. And we can kind of think about sort of the governance of the contract such that the BPs kind of vote on activating the contract and allocating it to a web app, right? So there's got to be some element there, but that's a detail. The bigger idea is that we create an application where people can just go ahead and register themselves and verify their identity using a service perhaps like Civic. And the reason why I think identity verification is important and interesting is twofold. The first is, if we're going to run a giveaway, we want people to have equal odds of winning.
Right.
If you
not just you can't go in and win 10 times.
You can sit and create wallets all day long. I mean, you could have hundreds or thousands of wallets, right? There's people that do that. So in this case, it's every one individual is entitled to sort of one stake in this giveaway. But the second thing is that it gives us some identifiable information, and we don't need a lot. Really, I think just name and email would be enough. But now we can contact this person, let them know about what Telos is doing. We can have some email correspondence, and at any point they can opt out, right?
Right. Or you could also have it so that all you're actually doing is verifying that it is a unique person who has not already applied before, and Telos may not actually get their information, right? Civic allows that, or some kind of, ideally some kind of Telos on-chain DApp allows that. So all you're doing is saying, no, this is a unique person in this system, not necessarily, and allowing the user to control how much disclosure they provide.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it could go either way. And from my perspective, I would be supportive of either. I mean, if you agree that having one person, claiming one participation stake is important, then you could use Civic just to verify that this person hasn't already created an account.
Right.
If you value sort of just getting the email and being able to email them info about Telos, then maybe we ask them to disclose more info. But to me, that's not a deal breaker one way or the other. But the idea is,
and the community will decide, right? I mean,
for sure.
I think it's a great idea.
I do feel strongly
because, and I think you shared this with me, and I liked it, and I thought this was interestingly a unique or a ideal way to use the worker proposal system, which you guys actually wrote, and we wanted to, and as we come up to, we wanted to talk about that a little bit, right? Because actually having a working system is pretty huge, but like that could be something like maybe we could talk a little bit about how the worker proposal system that Amplified is coding is with a little help from Craig, because he actually built the voting system that it's sharing, right? So that not each thing doesn't have to come up with its own voting system. So there's one voting system that works for anyone who wants to use it. But why don't you talk about that a little bit in the context of how your tip would actually be deployed using it?
Yeah, absolutely. So to refocus a little bit on the tip and sort of the giveaway, the thinking was, can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry, you cut out for a second. The thinking was that once people are registered, they're kind of just sort of in this lottery essentially. They don't have to pay any cryptocurrency, right? This isn't an ICO. Everyone's getting tokens for free, but we could pay out tokens, to people based off of when they register. So like say the first 1,000 are guaranteed X amount, the next 9,000 are guaranteed X amount, so on and so forth. And then there could also be tokens that just get randomly allocated. So we could say that, there's going to be 10,000 winners that win 100 tokens, and 1,000 winners that win 1,000 tokens, and 100 winners that win 10,000 tokens, right? And you can kind of play with those numbers. But I think that sort of like element of randomness and the idea of having like potentially huge payouts, like if you came out of this with 10,000 or 25,000 tokens, that could be really exciting. And I think that there are people that would, spend a minute or two to register. In the process, they learn about Telos, and then, within a few days or maybe a month later, the contract executes, the giveaway runs itself, and they check their wallet and they have tokens, right?
So that's great.
Where we would need sort of the support of the community is obviously just sort of like mission support here. We would need some support in the overall token design of Telos so we can populate this jackpot from the beginning, because I don't think any one entity could finance it or would necessarily want to. But as far as how it actually gets built, there is an application component to this, a web app component. We want it to be super easy. We want it to be very beautiful. We want it to be able to sort of communicate the virtues of Telos. And then we want the underlying giveaway and lottery experience to really reflect well on the technology, to really demonstrate what a high performance blockchain is capable of. So effectively, the way it would work, again, this is a decentralized community where anybody can contribute. So, it could be Amplified that contributes. It could be, anybody else. It could be a collaboration. But essentially, people would submit a worker proposal, which would just be, an application to build a project. The EOS, the Telos token holders would all sort of use their tokens to vote in favor of it. And there'd be sort of like a minimum threshold, like 0.01% of all the tokens in circulation. And once you hit that threshold, if half of them support it, half plus one, it'll get passed. And so what will happen is that it'll, hard coded into the worker proposal contract will be a payout of Telos tokens to the entity that is managing the actual proposal, that's executing the proposal. So, if you wanted to build the web application to run this giveaway, we could design the contract in such a way where you get a little bit of Telos tokens up front, and then every month, for 3 months, you'll get Telos tokens as it goes along. Now, obviously, there's concern that people could just get rewarded for their proposals, not actually deliver. And so the beauty of sort of the way Telos is designed is that people can always unvote. So if you're missing milestones, if you're not communicating to the community, if it doesn't seem like you're going to deliver, people can kind of unvote, at which point the contract will stop paying you out. So it's a really elegant system. It's a really cool innovation in on-chain governance. Obviously, we're not the first to have done stuff like this. I mean, you alluded to Dash and PayBags. I think Dash was the very first to do this back in 2015 or something similar to this. But I think it's a really effective way of sort of like financing ongoing development. We see this problem in Bitcoin. Bitcoin core developers now. It used to be the case that there were people that just started mining Bitcoin and they're engineers, and so they contributed to core development. But now, pretty much the vast majority of the core developers are working for Blockstream or Bitmain or just these various Bitcoin companies. Because if I were to go and buy one Bitcoin today, my own contributions to the Bitcoin network wouldn't be able to protect that investment, right? And so that, I think, is one of the design flaws of Bitcoin. But here, we have inflation, we're creating new tokens, and the majority of those tokens are going to get allocated to the people that are building applications and technologies that contribute to Telos. So Amplified is building the actual contract that does the worker proposal system, obviously with the help of many others who have contributed to it. At this point, we're just debugging and testing it. I mean, we've effectively finished that core contract, and so now we just want to test it and make sure it's rock solid. But it's in the last stretch there.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. I'm glad you guys took. I feel a little bit back in the day when we were signing these, I was like, why? I felt like I kind of nudged you a little bit. I said, why don't you guys just jump in and do it? And it sounds like you're glad that you did.
Sure.
At this point. But just to clarify a little bit, so that is exactly how the system works. And it is new, but it's not that new. So I was a longtime participant in that as a masternode owner in different coins, including Dash. And back when you used to be able to buy enough Dash, and now suddenly you can again a little bit, but it used to be a lot cheaper. Right. So, but that will change. Dash is actually really great for a proof of work coin. Mostly, it's a hybrid coin actually is pretty great. So that when I was trying to figure out what to do, how we could best start off this thinking about it, I looked at everything they were saying in EOS, and I thought, not that there aren't good ideas here, but boy, are they working hard to reinvent the wheel when there's a very mature, 3-year-old process that I saw develop over those 3 years and into something that's pretty robust. Now, only masternode owners could vote for it in that kind of hybrid proof of work, proof of stake, but we don't have to do that. We can add a lot. So actually, the idea of people voting for something that would have, we'd be paid out in month by month, and then being able to unvote from it is actually that's straight from the current Dash proposal. I would love to say that I came up with that, but that's just something in the real world that works. Now, what we did add, which is I think great, is that we have arbitrators. And so if somebody really doesn't deliver, the block producers on the behalf of the system can say, hey, you guys just are working the system, and they can go through the arbitration process and get that taken back. In Dash, the way it really works is purely reputationally.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and which is not bad. They just don't have a tool that we have, which is great, because it'll make the governance that's a great example of how the governance just gets better and better. But in Dash, what you would probably do in a system, how you would probably do this process would be, you would come out and you would say, hey, we're going to do, here's our proposal. Here's what we need just to get it off the ground, to get maybe a proof of concept out of this. And can we get a small amount of money from the worker proposal fund? And people would, if they liked it, and they would do it, and and they would say yes, partly because it was small, or maybe they'd say yes because if it's amplified and you guys have built if you guys actually built that system, there's more trust in you. You're probably going to be a block producer, and which, by the way, it's perfectly fine for block producers to do these things, right? Because it's outside the normal scope of work for block producers. So let's say you would come out, you would propose this, they know who you are, you're not going to run away, and if you are, they can get you because they just vote you out of being a block producer if you turn out to be so you have a strong reputation. But if somebody didn't have a strong reputation, they'd probably start small, and they would propose this, and then they deliver on it, and then they propose another thing, and they deliver on that. And then once it was ready to fund this, once they said, okay, now we've got it, it works. We did the proof of concept, we did the minimum viable product, we did some upgrades and testing. Now it's ready to go. It's been 3. Now it's ready to go. Let's deploy this, and we'll just deploy it to go, every month for the next 4 months. It'll automatically renew unless people decide to unvote it. And the way it'll go is, 98% of the money goes. 99% of the money goes directly to the contract to fund this, and 1% or something goes to us just to have an engineer be able to check on it once in a while and flag any problems and fix them. Right? Something like, I don't know what the split would be, but it'd be something like that. Right. And then that could, if that's voted for, that will just go and it'll automatically fund it, and it doesn't require a lot of manual stuff, right? It's a smart contract. And the thing you describe, which I think is really interesting, and the voting process allows the community to say whether they want it and to give you feedback and contribute their own great ideas. That is how you build a network that is responsive. I think it's great. And I actually think your proposal, once the community weighs in, would be really strong.
Yeah, I think, zooming out a little bit, one of the most fascinating sort of sociological things that is happening in the world of cryptocurrency is that for the first time in human history, we now have a technology that allows people to produce and consume their own capital. And all these different networks are feeding themselves, right? And some are doing it better than others based on sort of the particularities of how the network is designed and sort of the crypto economics that are built into it. But I really believe that the networks that succeed in the long run in terms of building highly scalable, usable applications that ordinary people use and benefit from, those networks will have very proper governance design and also crypto economics from the ground up. And I think the worker proposal system is a critical component of that, because it gives Telos a real chance of becoming a self-sustaining network. Yep. And that's the only way we can succeed, right? Because we're not doing an ICO. We're not asking people to send us Bitcoin and Ether so we can give them tokens. The only way this succeeds is if people can contribute, earn Telos or honestly earn it because of their contributions. Yeah. And if those contributions result in, improving the network, right? And if we can create a positive feedback loop where the token appreciates in value, which allows us to finance, more investment in the network, then ultimately we'll get to a place where we do have a self-sustaining ecosystem that is non-reliant on outside capital, and everybody who's in the network is prospering. So that's the dream. We have to bootstrap it. So maybe someday in the future, I can come back to business school and talk about the case that was written because of Telos.
Yeah.
I think we'll get there eventually, but
it would be a very
exciting.
nice bookend on your, if you start with the Bitcoin one and then master's or doctorate, whatever you're going to get next, wherever your academic degree career terminates. If you do that on the Telos launch, I would love, that would be an amazing bookend of dissertations.
You know, it does really feel full circle to me because with the thesis that I wrote, I mean, the big view there was that Bitcoin is just fantastically innovative in a lot of different ways. And I do not harbor hate towards Bitcoin by any means. I mean, like, this is all possible because of Bitcoin, right? Yeah. But at the same time, it does have some critical flaws. And, you know, the lack of, I mean, you know, Satoshi was brilliant when it came to cryptography and peer-to-peer networking and mathematics and economics and so many different fields, but he was not a political scientist. And he thought he could ignore that entire aspect of the network. And now we've got a lot of people, us and others on various projects. The Decred is another one that I think is a leader when it comes to this kind of stuff, that recognize that you have to take the governance component seriously. And for us, the worker proposal system is not the entirety of it, but it is a critical cog in that overall machine.
Yeah, I mean, he, she, they solved the Byzantine generals problem, solving, Fermi's equation or something like that. I mean, it's one of the great puzzles. It's the Gordian knot of puzzles. He solved it. So, or she solved it, or they solved it. So I don't think that person, entity, group has anything to apologize for. And that if we as a of a bunch of other people who are just handed that amazing development 10 years later or 9 years later hadn't made some major strides in it, then we should be embarrassed. And I think this is a chance to do it. And talking about governance, I mean, we're fortunate enough we all live in the United States, and we're fortunate to live in a country that for the time being remains a representational democracy. And that's very lucky, but most of the people in the world have not actually had a chance to participate in a freely elected democracy. And so this taking part in Telos could very easily be their first chance to do it, right? It could actually change their ideas. And in some ways it's direct democracy, and direct democracy has never been feasible for anything other than small groups because until blockchain came along. And now it actually could potentially be feasible. I don't know if this is the ideal vehicle for it, but it's a great test bed for it, and I'm excited. And personally, I think the idea of getting rid of worker proposal system, which some people are proposing, or just burning it or whatever, I think that's very wrong-headed, because what it's doing is saying, especially in the EOS, saying if you say, okay, well, we've got $4 billion, we're just going to use that. It's like, well, yeah, but there's strings attached to that. That's VC funding. That's gonna be through one entity. They're going to make the decisions. It's the worst version of that centralization first mode of decentralize everything, right? And what we're trying to do is say, you know what, stand or fall, let's set it up for the people to be able to vote. Fortunately, there's nobody who has the hyper vote themselves rich. Inflation. Everyone's gonna, for something to pass, it's gonna have to work, and then along with that, people have the ratify amend capability right off the bat, which is being worked on by Craig at Goodblock and the rest of us here. And so if it doesn't work, somebody can amend it, and somebody can figure out a better way to make it work. We're not looking for a problem that doesn't have a solution, or a situation that doesn't have any problems or shortcomings. We're saying it will, and here's the method by which it can evolve and become better over time.
Absolutely. I would add with the EOS model is that $4 billion actually is a finite amount of money. It probably feels infinite to them. But I'm sure they can find 4 billion different ways to spend it. And
well, yeah, and I mean, look, I that if Telos can last 5 years, it'll be around in 500 years. Truly
Right.
believe that, right? Because there's not, once it gets underway and starts, there's, if it can last 5 years, it'll last 500 and maybe longer, right? So $4 billion would not last 500 years, right?
Right.
But this system can.
Can we talk about the monitor quickly?
Sure, and then I think we should probably wrap it. I could keep talking about this stuff all day, but yeah, I want you to talk about it because you guys are doing an awesome job, and I want to hear where that is. I think we're going to start linking to that tomorrow, even though there's a little bit of syncing still to do. Is that the plan?
We're going to try to push it out by Friday morning. So yes, there's still a little bit of synchronization of syncing that's going on. Hopefully be done by then. There's some small modifications, but we've spent the last couple of weeks working on it. We feel really comfortable with what we have as a V1. And so we'd love to actually declare it as having been released before the go, no go check. And I think we're on track for that. So very quickly, sort of what we did is we started by taking the EOS web open source monitor, which is what EOS community is using. And we made some critical improvements and modifications to it. So the first is we made it compatible with Telos by displaying Telos activity and block producer information. The second is just UI changes. We reskinned the branding. We took out EOS token price information. The producers list is a place where we added quite a bit of functionality to it. So we actually have a live tracking feature, so you can see in real time the last block that has been produced, when it was produced, what the next rotation is. And this updates automatically as you just sort of look at the app. We also mark sort of which block producers are doing what. So there's 21 that are active that are in the producer schedule. Those are identified as active. You've got 30 that are marked standby. Then you have the candidates, which are outside the top 51, and then you have inactive, which are BPs that are offline or down for maintenance or whatever. So that stuff is all visualized there in the monitor. We've also made it possible to register as a block producer through the actual monitor. So you can connect your node to the Telos network, and then you will populate in the. And then of course we have the block explorer components so that you can open up a specific block, look at the information in it. The next sort of work in progress item there is to actually allow you to follow the unique transactions. So that's going to be coming kind of in the second sprint. Mm-hmm. But as far as where we're going to go, we're finishing sprint 1. We're starting on sprint 2. We're looking to switching to a MongoDB plugin. The plugin we're using right now is deprecated, and it's also a little computationally inefficient. There's a vote track.
Yeah, so that will get a lot faster and better.
Yep.
And you had to create so there's additional things that you could see using this block explorer that no one needed to do with EOS block explorers because they're new functionality that the Telos development team put together. For example, you can see who's rotated in and rotated out on the system, which is awesome. It's right there in your face that yes, we promised. Pretty cool too. And also within that, you guys added what wasn't there before is you added or are adding. I'm not sure if I'm looking at the live version or the developer version, but you're adding the ability for whoever's next on the rotation to get some time off to get a head start on that. So they go, oh yeah, okay, well, come 10 o'clock, we're gonna be rotated out anyway, so we can take our node down do some maintenance, and it actually lowers the cost of them and the stress of them maintaining their network. That's pretty cool.
For sure. Yeah. If you go to the producers page, so we obviously need to get a better URL, and eventually this will be hosted on the Telos Foundation website. But if you go to the producers page, you can see obviously the active and the standby and inactive producers, and then it tells you their next rotation when it's scheduled. So you can plan.
So we're actually talking about whenever you guys, even before all the new in, I think tomorrow. Taking our pointer from our existing old one and putting it on your nice new shiny one, even though not every feature will be in yet. And then in conjunction with that, or very close to that timing, injecting the brand new, injecting our updated Telos Genesis snapshot, which is the EOS snapshot with the cap, with the new institutions added, and with all the replaced key requests that we've had and been able to verify so far added. And by the way, if you have old keys or you lost your keys or whatever on EOS, if you go to telosfoundation.io/recovery, there's a very simple process that was established for the EOS mainnet where you can get new keys. And so we're going to take all those that we have, which is, we have a chunk now, but not as many as we're going to have. And we want to put those on so that people can actually look at their accounts, right? So people don't have to, instead of people saying, hey, when are we gonna say, go test it out, go here, use this, go look and see on the testnet if you can see your account. And I think that's going to be an exciting thing for people. So it looks like we're close to. Both Ian and Jesse had so much stuff to talk about that it went on. So I think we should wrap this up. I want to thank Ian, Jesse. So Ian, thank you so much. Any closing remarks or where you want to point us to look at?
I would say for Amplified, we are a block producer candidate. And when it comes to it, we would definitely appreciate the support of the community. And you can learn more about us by just visiting Amplified.software.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ian. And Jesse, love to. You want to do a little sign off and tell us about CalEOS and where people can find out more about your organization?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Check us out on our website. We have CalEOS.io. We got a Medium page. I actually have an article up about the EOS benchmarks, so you can kind of learn about how that mechanics group is benchmarking CPUs and stuff. And we are also a block producer candidate on Telos, so reach out to us. We have a Telegram. Love to chat. Anybody who's looking for kind of technical development advice, love to talk about just to get an app going on Telos. And if you want to join up on the testnet, come join us in that Telegram, and we'll help you get hooked up there too.
Yeah, thank you. And both Amplified.Telos and CalEOS, both Ian and Jesse and their teams are making real contributions that are really helping the Telos network launch. So hopefully people should remember all that they're doing when it comes time to vote. And once that block explorer is up there and the testnet and the testnet is injected with the Genesis accounts, I think people are going to actually be able to. They're going to have their Telos. They can vote on the testnet for their favorites and test some of those things out. It's going to be really exciting. I think we have very exciting days ahead. The go, no go vote is Friday morning Pacific time. Just remember, this is not based on a date. We're not going to launch based on a date. We're going to launch when all those things on the checklist at telosfoundation.io/launch are green checks. If you want to look at it, if you want to guess on whether we're going to launch, I would say they are not all green checks yet. So use that as your guide on whether or not, but whether we're going to launch, how we're going to launch, on how people will vote on Friday. But that's how I judge. But we're going to, whatever happens, we will have all our pieces and get the network. Give people the network that we're promising them, so that it can do, so it can be what we think it can and should be. Ian, Jesse, thanks so much both for being here today, and also from your fantastic contributions going forward. And we will see you guys on the next call, which I guess the next call we all have will be the Friday Go No Vote Go Vote.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Douglas.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll wrap it up. Thanks, everybody, for listening. There was one question that for exchanges claimed Telos from the original snapshot before you decide to burn the tokens. I think we will probably never decide to burn the tokens. That will be up to all decisions once it launches will be up to the block producers at the time, because it's a truly decentralized network and we can't impose anything on them. So, but my guess, and if they asked my advice, and if I happen to be a block producer at the time, I would say never pull out the possibility for those original people to take part. There's we should be welcoming anytime. So thanks for the questions. You can always come to Discord or Telegram or whatever for more questions. And thanks. I'm going to sign off now. See you guys on the launch day.